Hi there, this is Danny with End Time Country Living, and on this video I wanted to talk to you a little bit about making compost. I've found that compost is a very valuable ingredient when you're trying to grow food. It provides a nice mulch which keeps the moisture in the soil longer so it doesn't dry out as quickly, and it also allows the biology kind of inoculates the soil and encourages the biology to release a lot of the minerals that the plants need from the soil. And so you don't need fertilizer necessarily when you have a nice layer of compost on your beds. And so the best way to get good compost, I've found, is to make it yourself out of grass clippings and fall leaves. And that's a resource that if you have a property large enough that you can collect those materials just right from your own property, and you don't have to go buy them in every year. So I'm out this morning getting some mowing done. So I found that just composting or building my compost piles at the same time I do the mowing seems to be the most efficient way. And it allows the grass clippings to be the freshest and not dried out and already lost some of their nitrogen. So as soon as you start cutting it, they start to gas off ammonium into the atmosphere. And so one thing that you can do is to help, you want to combine it with a high carbon source, such as brown material, dried out, little wood chips, fall leaves I found work really well, little sticks or something like that, little twigs, things like that that will help to basically the biology in order to decompose these brown materials needs that nitrogen, so it uses it, but it doesn't destroy it, it just changes the form of it. And it basically locks it up in a form that isn't going to leach very easily and definitely not off gas. And so you're also preserving a lot of organic matter that might, it will break down much faster if it doesn't have that carbon source mixed in with it. And so you want to have bulk for use in the garden, and also you want to have that, the nitrogen and also other minerals in the greens and the browns material that you're composting, this organic material. And so that all helps to create a great compost. So I'm very thankful to have a homestead cart. These are, I think, made in Albany or somewhere, Salem area in Oregon here. And they're a very high quality cart. And my dad actually was very kind enough to make this little frame for the front part of it. It normally has slanted edges. You can see over here it kind of slants down, so that's the original, and then my dad made this kind of angled and then square box. This metal actually came off of the, it was an electric heater that was in the old manufactured home that came with our property. And so this has a little bit of history here with it here. And then you put some angle iron on the top here and make some bolts, so it was very good of him to do that for me. And so it makes a very useful cart to be able to pack up the grass and get it a lot higher and hold a lot more before it starts to fall out the front. So I use this for my grass clippings when I go out and do mowing. I have quite a bit of area here that needs to be mowed, and it's a blessing as well to be able to have this organic material. A lot of it is weeds as well, which actually are better than just grass clippings. So we have a lot of things like dandelions in there, and other ones like plantain. There's lots of plantain out there, and all kinds of other unidentified weeds that all mix together to make a good mix of organic ones with good tap roots. Is good to have because they bring up a lot more minerals and store them in the leaves. So the two main tools that I use is this manure fork, I think is the official name. So it's much larger than a normal 4-pronged pitchfork that you might see in the garden stores. So this has 5 tines and they are like 18 inches long or so. So this works really well for moving large bits of grass. The other one I use for both grass when it starts to get like a dump it on the ground, or I need to, like when the cart gets, you know, basically empty, I have to dump it out in order to get the grass clippings out efficiently. The scoop shovel works really well for scooping out the remainder or off the ground, doing cleanup, things like that. And this is also what I use primarily for my brown leaves. So I put the leaves on my garden over winter, and then in the spring I pulled them off and piled them up here in my composting area so that they'd be convenient for scooping up and mixing with my green material. So I have here a start of a compost pile. I've been doing them more in long rows. Windrows is what the, I think, official name is. And that allows me to cover it efficiently with plastic. So it keeps the moisture in and decomposes. So I have at least 2 that are big tarps, black plastic tarps. They seem to work the best and hold up the longest and not break down and leave little strings of plastic in my compost, because they're a solid, I think polypropylene or something like that. And so I have ones that are about 10 feet wide by about 18 feet long, and that allows me to do a nice windrow in several different areas. I have a couple back there. I've 2 back there I've already started, and one that's over there was from last year. It still has some compost from last year in there. And so this is another little area I have here moving forward that I can, it's going to be, it's about 5 feet wide or so, and maybe about 4 feet. It's probably more like 4 feet wide, but then by the time you get up, you need that 10 feet or so to give another foot on either side to get it covered well. And then as long as you need it, you can fold it up, only use part of it if you need to, or you can use the whole thing as needed. And so I find, a section like this, try to get it built up fairly high, does better than if I just covered this up and left it, it wouldn't heat up very well because it doesn't have enough height. You want to have, at least 3 to 4 feet in any dimension in a pile. That allows it to heat up a lot better. If you don't have that much, do the best you can to, get the pile concentrated in a ball or, a box. A square box works pretty good. And, not having so much of a mound, I found. So this is actually like a technique that farmers have used for, hundreds of years in the past. When they go to collect hay and they want to stack it on a wagon, the technique is you want to build it up not in a big mound, but you want to go in more like a box shape, a big rectangle where you want to keep moving it. The edges need to be at the same height as the center, and that allows you to keep building up without it spilling over. And also this idea of dimensions where you have this kind of little mound at the top which doesn't have a lot of volume to it, but then you got it down at the bottom, and then it's kind of sparse, and then it's got these little sharp edges and angles that there isn't much thickness to it there. So if you can keep it a box, it allows a lot more heat build up in there, and that kills off your weed seeds and fungal pathogens that may get into your plants if they're not destroyed. But mainly weed seeds is what I'm concerned about, things like that. And so that's what I'm trying to accomplish here. And so how you do that is to rake as you're putting it on, so put it on there, and then you want to rake it to the edges. So I used the fork here for that. So let me grab some grass, and so we want to, as you dump it on there, you're going to have a pile, and then there's going to be this area in here which no longer has grass on there or material. So you want to take your tines and work that to the edge, pull that to the edge, and you can just leave the center kind of empty and it'll fill in itself. But work on getting the edges pulled, and you can tighten up the edges if needed. But work it to the edges like that. Pull it out of the center and to the edges, and even pack it down just slightly there just to keep the shape, but that's how you keep the shape. So that works really well for building it up, and that way you can get it fairly tall. All right, so I just want to quickly show you a little bit about how I build it. So I'm going to be starting out with some brown material on the bottom. That allows a little bit more airflow to come up through. I'm going to concentrate on getting good airflow, because if you don't get good airflow, then it's going to go anaerobic. It's not going to heat up as much. And so focusing on not packing it down. So you don't want to get up there and jump on it and pack it down. You want to get as nice fluffy as possible. So that's the first consideration. And so I've gotten quite a bit of green material on here right now. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my scoop shovel and go over here to my pile. Get about a scoopful or so of my leaves and other brown material, and then I'm just going to go back and forth, sprinkle that over one way and then come back on the other side and just get a nice layer. Don't need very much. And then I'm going to go ahead, since it's dry material, I have my garden hose hooked up with a water breaker and a watering wand. So this works really well for getting it wet. And I don't want to get it too wet, so this is kind of watch how much I'm doing it, back and forth a couple times, and then that's it. You don't want to do too much or it'll get too wet and it won't do well. Okay, so then next thing I need to do, since I got that wet, I'm going to grab my fork here and grab grass clippings. So I want at least twice as much, or maybe a little bit more. Need quite a bit of green material to the brown there in order to get enough nitrogen to break down everything. So I'll just kind of go over it a couple times, remembering to keep it out of the center. You do a little bit more. It's a couple inches or so thick, all that layer is. Then go and grab my water again and water this layer as well. Doesn't take a lot of water at a time, but you need to be consistently getting all the layers wet as you go up. You can't build the pile and then try to water it down. It doesn't work very well. There's too many areas that don't get wet at all, and the pile just won't evenly decompose if you don't, for every little layer that you do, get it wet with a little water. So that is pretty much it as far as the structure. So I'm going to go ahead and grab another shovelful of the leaves and other brown material and sprinkle that and keep going. So it's just kind of back and forth here with giving, like I said, more grass clippings to the brown. You just need a thin layer of the brown, but you do need it, otherwise it isn't going to have that, like I said, it's going to start off-gassing the nitrogen into the atmosphere, and you're going to lose that, and it's also going to get slimy and not going to have good airflow because of the brown material in there. So it's lots of good benefits to that. So having a good valve on your hose, it really helps to be able to function easily and get good water flow. And so you're not hampered by tiny little valves that are hard to turn, and something that's going to last a long time is important too, so you don't have to keep replacing them. I've gotten a lot of the Melnor valves, which are very nice as far as functionality and water flow, but they decided to make the little handle on them out of plastic, and so it takes about a year before that breaks. Just even being very careful with it, it just gets brittle, and you just kind of set it down, or you step on it accidentally, or something happens. Just usually just kind of, you want to be able to toss it down on the ground a little bit, reach, at arm's length, go down drop it a couple feet and throw it down without having to be setting it so carefully. So inevitably it's going to land on the handle at the wrong angle and crack that right off. So, so this is one that I've put together because I haven't been able to find a good quality one that's already comes pre-put together with a garden hose fittings. So this is an ever-built 3/4 inch ball valve. So I took the watering wand off here. So this has a very nice polished stainless steel ball as the ball valve in here. And so this allows you good easy operation of it. And it also has a nice steel that's held on there by a nut, and that allows you to have very good operation with a nice full hand on there. And so there's very good flow to it. And so this is just a standard hose thread, 3/4 inch on both ends of this little valve. And so I had to buy a little, standard hose thread to garden hose thread. They're different. And so that's what I put that on the front of it here so I can attach a watering wand to it. And then on the other side here, I had to get, this was actually just a hose thread, standard hose thread, 3/4 inch to 3/4 inch, just a little stub in there. And then I had a 3/4 inch standard hose thread to garden hose. So this one is, well, it's supposed to turn. Doesn't seem like it wants to turn at the moment here, but it can, this part can turn a little bit here from this other part. If you could find one that is, what is this? This would be female garden hose thread that would go into a male standard thread that would have the standard thread on there already. That would be a cheaper option, not have to buy 2 parts here. So there's actually 4 parts to this whole valve, so that adds to the cost of it, unfortunately, but that's the best I could do. And so it's you can actually take apart this valve and clean it out if it gets dirty or built up in there, or you can lubricate it. So that's one nice thing about here. I did find out I had 2 of these, and one I left out over winter, and it was just empty. There wasn't any water in there, but there was apparently around the edges, there was a little bit of water, and it did crack. And so it became useless. And so I had to replace it with this other one. The other fittings on here I could reuse, but I learned my lesson to bring it in when the freezing weather comes and not leave it out here, because the brass is a little more fragile. And maybe a plastic ball valve or something like that. But I've been very pleased with this. It works, I can have a nice handle, and it's very smooth operation. Don't have to fight with it at all. And has a nice, good weight to it. And so that, gives you a little bit more control when the water's doesn't go like fly out when the water comes on or something like that. It gives a little bit more of a weight to it. So I was just watching a short news video that was talking about all the droughts that are going around the United States in different areas, in the western part of the United States specifically. There was a lot of droughts in California and Arizona and Nevada and even in Oregon. Especially this year, I've noticed a lot of that the rainfall is just not what it has been historically. And we're really low on water. As you know, the snowpack isn't very much this year, which a lot of the eastern part of the state relies on for their water source to fill the streams and things like that and the rivers. And you know, around here we need that water to refill some of the aquifers and fill our wells up with. And so the groundwater isn't getting replenished like it needs to. I'm very thankful to have a good well that puts out about 12.5 gallons a minute that I can use to water our garden with. But a lot of people don't have, you know, that good of well, and sometimes they're only a few gallons per minute. And so storing water becomes very important. And so the usefulness of mulch is very important when you're growing crops for food, and it, you know, be able to hold that moisture in and not have to water so often. So that's one of the benefits of compost as a mulch on top. And so it also really helps, like I said, you don't have to be fertilizing quite as much, or any, you know, I really don't do much at all fertilizing. So it's all basically coming as through the compost. You know, we are also living in the end times of this earth's history. We can see that from Matthew 24, some of the signs of Jesus coming. And the last generation, we've come into that time frame. We've passed the last time prophecy, and that marked the beginning of the end times. And so we're going to be needing to spend more time in evangelism, and also in learning some of the skills we need to provide our needs for our family, you know, food and water and heat and cooking ability, things like that. Not being so dependent on the world, to be able to withdraw from the world in a way, to protect ourselves from the influence of the world, and especially our children, be able to protect them from the negative influence. There's so much in the media and so much negative character traits that are being portrayed, and by beholding we become changed. So we need to be beholding nature as much as possible and being out there in nature. And so, you know, if you have to work in town all week long, be sure to get out there on, you know, your days off to be able to spend some time in nature and some quietness with God. But you know, being in the country, you know, in-time country living, that's, you know, specifies some of the things that I think are really important. We are in the end times, and you know, being in the country is one of the best places to be during this time. The judgments are going to be coming on the cities. They will be destroyed by fire, just like Sodom and Gomorrah were. And so, you know, withdrawing from that area, all the, you know, problems generally happen in the city. The only, you know, problems like what we have out here in the country is like wildfire and maybe an earthquake or something like that in certain areas, part of the country. Flooding, you know, there are, you know, some natural disasters that will impact us as well, but we don't have a lot of the political strife, rioting, you know, robberies, you know, crime happening, things like that. So you're protected quite a bit from that, and just the chaos of the world, the noise and confusion and things that would distract us from having a close relationship with God. And so I really encourage you to find a country home and practice growing your own food and providing your own firewood so that you can cook and heat your home. And so that is something to consider as we get closer and closer to the end times. At some point, we will be required to follow laws that go against God's laws. And if we don't, we will be removed from the economy, you know, a point where we will not be able to buy or sell unless we follow the rules that go against what God has said. And so we need to be able to provide for our own needs at that point so we can continue ministry to others. So that is one of the reasons why I am putting a lot of effort into practicing growing things like dry beans and dry corn, things that will keep over the winter very well and provide a lot of calories, and also a lot of greens that we can then freeze and be able to use. If we need be, we can dehydrate them and turn them into powders to get that nutrition during the winter time. When there's only a few things that will survive over the winter time, or sometimes the bugs take them out and we have nothing over the winter time. And so having that in the freezer right now while we still have electricity, and maybe dehydrating them in the sun after that, where you always have your car, if you have that available to you, you can dehydrate in a vehicle, put it on screens in the vehicle, and you can dehydrate greens very, very nicely in there. And so all kinds of things we can do to kind of give us good food sources. And berries and fruit are a very important part of that as well, because they have a lot of calories and nutrition in there to keep us healthy. And so that's kind of about, practicing some of the bigger crops right now, and especially my corn and beans, kind of focusing on that, trying to get good at that, find the varieties that work really well in our area. And so I encourage you to find different crops that do well in your area that you can preserve. Some other crops that I'm also practicing with and trying to get really good at is growing Irish potatoes and also sweet potatoes. So those are two good crops that you can store over the winter and also high in calories. Butternut squash have always gotten pretty good at that, and so that's another main crop that I use to store over the winter time. Those will last a year. Onions are another great vegetable that stores over the winter time, so I've been kind of focusing on that as well. And so there's lots of good crops that are very nutritious, that even my children will eat. Not so much the sweet potatoes. I got Ginger that'll eat the sweet potatoes with me occasionally. But the onions, those can be readily used by everyone, and the Irish potatoes can be used by everyone. And so just kind of learning how to increase some of the beds, increase the number, and see what it really takes to get them to turn out well, what kind of amendments I need to add, what kind of culturing as far as working the soil I need, cultivation that I can do. I'm trying some more mounded beds this year to see if that really does improve the yield. And we'll see if, I've had the best success when I do mound up the potatoes. And so we'll see how that works. I haven't done that with the sweet potatoes yet, and may or may not turn out to be a good thing. Depends on, the lack of moisture. The beds dry out a lot more, so I'm going to have to maybe water a little bit more, but we'll see here. Just kind of a learning process, and when I try to actually get it figured out, I'll let you guys know what works well, at least in my area. And so it's kind of what I like to try things out and practice them, for several years before I even, really talk about them. So there's a lot of things I've been practicing and trying out. I haven't even, brought up to you guys because I don't know if it's going to work, and I hate to say, oh yeah, hey, this is the greatest new method, and then I find out a couple years down the road, well, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. So, I don't want to be presenting things and having you, try and fail with them too. Because when you start planting something, you get this great idea of how you think you want to do it, and it's like, oh yeah, hey, this is how you should do it. But you got to try it out for a few years, because even 1 year of success doesn't mean it's going to be something you're going to be continuing on. And if I'm not going to be continuing on with the method, I don't want to be publicizing that and saying, hey, this is how you should do it, even though it's worked well for a couple of years. It doesn't mean it will continue. So look for people that have been doing something for 10 years And if they're still doing it that way and they're still having success, hey, you know, pay attention. And so I try to get ideas from lots of different people that have been doing it for a long time, and you know, maybe their method isn't the best, even though they've been doing it a long time. But you can learn, get some good tips from it, and maybe some aspect of it can be useful to you. So anyway, well, that's probably long enough for this video. God bless, keep praying, and I will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.